Welcome everyone to the IPSASB's Advancing Public Sector Sustainability Reporting webinar. As the title of this webinar suggests, what we'll be covering today is the IPSASB's Sustainability Reporting Consultation Paper that was released in May. This is a really important initiative for the IPSASB and is in a slightly different direction than our normal financial reporting work that the IPSASB focuses on. As a result, the IPSASB is holding several webinars across the globe in different time zones in order to reach out to stakeholders beyond just our financial reporting type stakeholders, and also reach out to those that have more of an interest in sustainability and sustainability reporting in order to seek views. And really one of the general purposes of this webinar is to ensure that we're sharing knowledge and making sure that this CP is as widely spread as possible. The second objective of this webinar is going to be to seek your views on some of the preliminary views and specific matters for comment that are raised in the consultation paper. This consultation paper was issued on May 9th and the consultation period closes on September 9th. Coming out of a consultation period, a number of IPSASB constituents will respond in writing to the consultation paper and provide views on the preliminary views and specific matters for comment. At each of these webinars, we'll be seeking views from attendees, and all the views that are collected from the webinars will be included in the IPSASB's response analysis and considered in Q4 2022, so that in December, when the IPSASB ultimately makes its decision on how to proceed with sustainability reporting, we're including not only the views from the written responses, but we'll also include all the analysis and views from the webinars that we're holding. So to kick things off, you have two presenters today. Myself on the top left, Dave Warren, I'm the IPSASB's Deputy Director. And then on the bottom right, we have Augustina Yambi, who is the IPSASB Senior Manager. Both of us have worked hard this year to develop the consultation paper and more recently make sure that it's distributed appropriately and raise awareness. So we'll walk you through the consultation, and what we'll try to do is beyond specifically what's in the consultation, because we both worked on its development, we'll try to highlight some insights that the board had in developing the guidance and hopefully help you through it. If nothing else, to get your views today, but hopefully it helps you in crafting a response in response to this consultation paper, which closes on September 9th. So I wanted to spend one slide talking about the IPSASB, and then we'll really dive into the consultation paper. So the IPSASB is the global standard setter that develops financial reporting standards for the public sector globally. And what the IPSASB's real goal is to develop these standards so that those in the public sector that are decision makers, their decisions are reflected in financial reports, and users of those statements can hold those decision makers to account and evaluate their decisions. These standards are developed by the IPSASB, which is made up of 18 members globally. The IPSASB is very proud of the fact that it has a very diverse regional background. We evaluate membership based on 7 regions around the world, and we make sure that we have at least one individual from each of those regions. In 2021, the IPSASB also reached for the first time gender balance, where we had 9 women on the board and 9 men on the board. And then finally, the IPSASB also ensures that its functional representation is balanced as well. The IPSASB has board members from an audit background, a preparer background, practitioners, academics, all walks of life, to ensure that there's an appropriate representation from all different professions that use financial reporting. An important aspect of the development of the IPSASB standards is that they're developed in an open and transparent way. And what I mean by that is the IPSASB has a very open consultation process. This is a good example where the IPSASB issues a consultation paper or exposure draft, and it's issued publicly, and anyone that is interested is welcome to respond. Those that are interested can respond to all the questions, they can respond to those that apply to them, but ultimately that's all shared publicly. The IPSASB's analysis is shared publicly so that there's full transparency in how the the guidance is developed. On top of that transparent consultation process, the IPSASB also holds all its meetings live and can be attended by observers. And more recently, in the past 2.5 years or so, all our meetings are being streamed live on YouTube. All of the material is provided in advance on our website. As a result, it holds the IPSASB to account and makes sure that the standards are developed in a very transparent way. The ISSB's activities are funded primarily by the International Federation of Accountants, some international banks, and then a few sovereign governments as well. Finally, about 10 years ago, the IPSASB set up another layer in its due process, and that was to set up an oversight body, which we refer to as the Public Interest Committee. The Public Interest Committee ensures that the IPSASB is following its due process, specifically what I just walked through on the consultation and exposure draft phase, and ensuring that it is open and transparent. Representatives from the Public Interest Committee come from the World Bank, the IMF, the OECD, and IPSASB. So moving right into the consultation paper, for those of you that are here, I'm sure there's quite a bit of interest in sustainability reporting, or at least sustainability in general. And at least from my perspective, over the past 2 years or so, there's been this space has moved very quickly and seems to move more and more quickly every day. The IPSASB really started to consider sustainability reporting and how it fits into its broader work program probably about 18 months ago. So in March 2021, the IPSASB was looking to update its work program and issue its mid-period work program consultation. That's where it asked constituents what should be added to its work program. And this is really where the IPSASB started to consider how sustainability reporting fit into the IPSASB's current strategy. At the time, the IPSASB concluded that sustainability reporting was broader than just one single project, and the IPSASB began discussing how sustainability reporting would fit into its next strategy, the 2024 to 2028 strategy period. However, in November 2021, the IFRS Foundation announced that it had established the ISSB, the International Sustainability Standards Board, and this really jump-started the IPSASB to see that another body had entered the private sector space to develop sustainability reporting guidance, and as a result, made them more aware that there was more of a demand coming in the public sector space. This really all came to a head in January, I believe it was January 30th or January 31st, where the World Bank issued a report specifically identifying the IPSASB as a body that should lead a process, a consultation process to determine how sustainability reporting should be dealt with in the public sector. And that brings us to 3 months later, May 9th, 2022, where the IPSASB issued its consultation paper, which we'll go through today. Now, the broad strokes of the consultation paper really focuses on 3 aspects. The first is the IPSASB proposes that it should lead the consultation process, or it should lead the development of sustainability reporting in the public sector. Secondly, the IPSASB proposes that the first guidance that should be developed are general disclosure standards, and then also climate reporting standards. And then finally, the final proposal that's in the consultation paper goes around the fact that, as I mentioned at the very beginning, this is a very quick moving space, and constituents are demanding more and more so that there is sustainability reporting guidance. So as a result, the IPSASB believes it's important that this program move with haste. And as a result, should the IPSASB decide to go forward with this, they would develop guidance on an accelerated pace. I'll get to that accelerated pace at the very end of the presentation. Finally, in making its decision on whether to move forward and develop sustainability reporting for the public sector, the IPSASB is going to really base that decision on 2 factors. One, it wants to hear from you, its stakeholders and constituents, to determine whether there's support for the IPSASB to go forward. And 2, the IPSASB needs to ensure it has adequate resources to develop sustainability reporting guidance. Right now, the IPSASB has a very full financial reporting program on its plate and doesn't have additional resources to focus on sustainability reporting. To do sustainability reporting properly, the IPSASB will need to enhance and increase its resources so that it can deliver on a sustainability reporting work program. The first preliminary view that will come up after this slide, and that will be our first polling question, really focuses on the need for public sector sustainability reporting. And you'll see we've got two broad buckets here. And the first bucket at the very top focuses on the need for sustainability reporting in the public sector. And then the second box at the bottom focuses on the need for public sector specific sustainability reporting guidance. So said another way, the argument is that just applying the private sector guidance in the public sector isn't sufficient. So starting at the top box, the need for sustainability reporting in the public sector, the first point really goes back to something that I've touched on a few times, and this demand from individuals across the globe for more, I guess, entities in general to make more sustainable decisions, to deliver goods and services in a more sustainable way. And as an offshoot of that, that will require sustainability reporting, so that those users can evaluate whether entities are delivering on those sustainability initiatives. Now, this is starting to take shape more and more in the private sector, but because this is such a big initiative, it'll be difficult for the private sector to move the needle without significant support from the public sector. And the reason for this is on these massive global initiatives, the public sector really is the leader in this. They have the ability to tax, they have the ability to regulate, set policy, subsidize for initiatives. And what all these allow is for public sector entities to shape or influence the decisions made by individuals and private sector entities to really move to a more sustainable world. The second 2 points, economic, environmental, social, and governance, and then the capital markets bullet. Looking at the private sector globally, it represents about 40% of GDP. It employs 20% of the workforce, and it makes up about 40% of the global bond market. And what's really important here is, depending how the public sector decides to raise funds, whether it's through taxes or debt issuances, and how it decides to spend those funds, what initiatives it decides to lean into, will really drive where sustainability goes in the future. From a capital markets perspective, because the public sector makes up such a large segment of the bond market, it really has, I guess, 2 points. One, it has the ability to drive the reporting requirements there, but also if it doesn't keep up, then it'll be left behind and might not have the same access that it currently does. From the perspective of the need to have public sector specific standards, this really came down to 2 specific reasons from the IPSASB's point of view. The first is there's a difference in the public sector's focus. And what is meant by this is, in the private sector, just the way it's set up, often what can be reported, or the influence that a private sector entity can have, is really the impact on itself. So if an entity decides to purchase energy from in a clean way, or it's developed in a green way, that will have an impact on the entity itself, or have a major impact on the entity itself, either through costs or its carbon footprint. Whereas the way a number of public sector entities are set up, not only can they have an impact on the entity that's making that decision, but also more broadly on society. So you might have an energy regulator that decides to purchase energy in a green way, and that would be consistent with the private sector. But that energy regulator might also have the ability to decide that coal power plants are no longer appropriate, and all coal has to be or all energy has to be developed by wind. And as a result, that impact is broader than just an impact on the entity itself, and it's broader and can impact society in general. So as a result, there's really that different public sector focus that doesn't exist in the same way in the private sector. And then the final point on this slide is challenges in applying the private sector guidance in the public sector. And what the IPSASB has seen through its financial reporting work, and it's highlighted a number of these challenges in its conceptual framework, is there's just a number of differences between the public sector and the private sector. And as a result, it makes it difficult to apply or challenging sometimes to apply private sector guidance in the public sector. Some examples will be non-exchange transactions. There's just a plethora of these in the public sector. Assets in the public sector are often held for different reasons. In the private sector, you see that assets are often held for their financial capacity or to be able to generate cash flows, whereas in the public sector, they're often held for their service capacity or what goods and services they're able to provide to citizens. There's also the fact that the public sector is a regulator often, and just the longevity of the public sector makes it difficult to apply some private sector standards in the public sector. So I will stop here for a second and move right into our first preliminary view. There's a need for global public sector specific sustainability reporting guidance. Do you agree? And as I mentioned off the top, if whether you agree or disagree, if you have something to add, please include that in the question and answers box. We'll make sure we take that away after the session and make sure that's included in the response analysis. I assume that'll probably come up more if you disagree and you want to add something, but if there's something on the agree you want to add that the IPSASB might have missed, then please let us know. And like I said, we'll make sure that's included. So I guess good news for the IPSASB. I think everyone can see the results, but everyone that voted supported that the IPSASB or that public sector standards are necessary. Sustainability reporting standards are required in the public sector. So as a result, that's a good indication for the IPSASB in moving forward with this, and not necessarily unexpected. So I'll move into our next preliminary view that I wanted to go through. And this really, sorry, I'm just going to close this, the polling, and I'll present it first, and I'll go to the poll. So I wanted to go into the IPSASB's view that it really is the right fit for the IPSASB to lead this initiative. And there's really 5 big reasons as to why the IPSASB believes this. At the very top, the IPSASB right now really focuses on financial reporting, but it's not limited to financial reporting. In its conceptual framework, it talks about how there's general purpose financial statements, which is where the IPSASB spends most of its efforts right now, but there's also general purpose financial reports. And this is broader and really encompasses sustainability reporting, and is really a way in for the IPSASB to enter this space. And some evidence of this really comes from the second bullet, and it relates to recommended practice guidelines. As part of its work program, I'd probably say about 10 years ago now, the IPSASB developed recommended practice guidelines. And while these aren't authoritative, they're a good point to start right now if an entity wanted to step into sustainability reporting. There's 3 recommended practice guidelines, and recommended practice guideline 1, for example, focuses on reporting on the long-term sustainability of an entity's finances, and RPG 3, or recommended practice guideline 3, focuses on reporting service performance information. And as a result, both of those fit in really well into right now, if an entity wants to report on its sustainability initiatives, these are good ways to report on how that's going, how the entity's achieving its targets and outcomes, for an example. As a result, because the IPSASB's already developed these recommended practice guidelines, the IPSASB has shown that it can work in this space and already has a foot in to the sustainability reporting space. The third bullet focuses on the current projects. Right now, the IPSASB has 1 major project, natural resources. And while natural resources, the IPSASB specifically scoped out any sustainability disclosure or reporting related to natural resources, there is a link in that a number of sustainability initiatives that entities might enter into will often look to natural resources as ways to support them. So there's a natural link between these 2 projects. And while that right now the IPSASB has cut off that link so they can really focus on the recognition and measurement of natural resources, it's fairly easy to reestablish that link should constituents believe that's the way to go. The next point focuses on the 25 years of the IPSASB's experience. I talked quite a bit about the IPSASB's due process on the first or second slide, so I won't go into that again, except to highlight that the IPSASB does have a robust due process that can be applied to sustainability reporting. But more importantly is after doing financial reporting with the public sector for 25 years, the IPSASB has a number of contacts within the public sector that are well connected to what's going on in the public sector and sustainability reporting there. So as a result, there's less friction in moving forward with sustainability reporting from the IPSASB's point of view. The final point is because the IPSASB itself is proposing to move ahead with this, it can begin immediately. So as soon as the decision is made to move ahead, the IPSASB doesn't need to establish another board, which has some unavoidable setup time, identifying members, writing terms of reference, all that kind of establishment criteria. The IPSASB feels that because the ISSB was developed by the IFRS Foundation, the IPSASB will be able to leverage some of the guidance that's developed there, and as a result, can move with a little more haste than setting up an independent board. So finally, it was really just the fact that the IPSASB can begin this initiative now. So moving to the second preliminary view, the IPSASB's experiences, processes, and relationship enable it to develop global public sector sustainability reporting guidance. Do you agree? So I think we can close the polling. And again, there's fairly strong support there. I'll be interested to know from the individuals that disagreed, if you could write in the chat, I'd be really interested to know your views there so I can take those back to the IPSASB. Augustine, I'll pass it over to you so you can take us through the next couple of slides.
Thanks, Dave. So good morning, everyone. I'll be discussing the assessing the public sector issues. So specifically on the CP, it's discussed that if the IPSASB is to take forward the development of sustainability reporting, it will focus first on two topics, which would be general disclosure requirements for sustainability related to related information and climate-related disclosure. So the specific matter for comment looks to understand and know what are the pressing issues in your jurisdiction that should be prioritized by the IPSASB when it comes to sustainability. So through discussions with key stakeholders, the IPSASB identified 5 topics that could be prioritized and that I will be discussing right now. So the first one was Sustainable Development Goals developed by the UN. So it will be developing guidance to report on the progress towards those goals that are supposed to be attained by 2030. So that would be one of the first topics that the IPSASB consider prioritizing after the first two. The second one is the interface with the Natural Resource Project. As Dave mentioned, the existing CP scopes out sustainability disclosure, but the question will be whether the IPSASB should explore this in the future and therefore scope it in. The third one is complete sector versus entity. So the focus here is whether sustainability decisions and initiatives should assess the impact on the entity or take a wider perspective, meaning the impact of the entity's decisions on the environment, society, and governance. The fourth topic is materiality. And the question is, does the existing principle the IPSASB has for financial reporting holds true for sustainability reporting? Or should the IPSASB take a different approach and look at double materiality, meaning what is the impact on the entity from a materiality perspective, but also what is the impact of the decision of the entity on the environment, society, governance, and economy? The fifth one is data for statistical reporting. So one of the existing IPSASB strategy is alignment with the international statistical reporting. So the question is, should this be prioritized? And with this, I will move it to the specific matter for comment, which is if the IPSASB were to develop sustainability reporting guidance, what topics are the most pressing for you? So I think possibly you can close the poll. Okay, so it's definitely it's a variety of answers. Definitely the SDGs is the top one, and it will be interesting to know, particularly the individuals that selected other, what is that other, so we can take that into account. So thank you for your answers. I'll pass it to you, Dave.
Thanks, Augustine. And that is interesting. Right now, and I can only speak for myself, I've wrapped my head around how the IPSASB can develop sustainability reporting as it relates to climate, but moving into the broader SDGs, it'll be interesting to see where the IPSASB goes as it focuses on different aspects there and different goals and what reporting means there. So at this point, we'll take a little bit of a turn as to what the consultation paper focuses on. What we'd focus on now is how the IPSASB proposes to develop guidance should it go ahead with developing sustainability reporting. And what the IPSASB is wrestling with, and the IPSASB always wrestles with this in a financial reporting world as well, is two items that it's always trying to balance. And that's really, should it, how much to address the public sector issues, because as the guidance is being developed for the public sector, these issues are prioritized, versus the time to market and how quickly the IPSASB can get this guidance to market. And this slide in front of you really illustrates the continuum that the IPSASB operates on, and the balancing act that the IPSASB is trying to balance all the time, but particularly in sustainability reporting, because as I said off the bat, one of the three proposals that the IPSASB has in this consultation paper is that the guidance needs to be developed with haste. If you look at the left-hand side of this diagram, one way that the IPSASB could get guidance to market extremely quickly is to rely on guidance that's developed in the private sector. The challenge with this is, and I talked to this already, the private sector guidance doesn't necessarily address public sector issues. So while you're getting guidance there in an extremely timely manner, it might not be completely applicable, or it might not address all public sector issues. On the right-hand side of this diagram, this is the other end of the spectrum, where the IPSASB would focus on addressing all the public sector issues and develop guidance greenfield, so not look to any private sector guidance. Now, obviously here, the benefit is that all public sector issues are addressed, but the guidance isn't developed in a timely manner. So what the IPSASB is proposing is that on a topic by topic basis, whether it's climate, which is where the IPSASB is expecting to begin, or whether it's specific SDGs as it moves along in its process and sustainability reporting evolves, each topic would be evaluated to determine whether there's private sector guidance that the IPSASB feels is a good starting point for the public sector. And then where it's appropriate, it would align with that private sector guidance. Where it's not appropriate, public sector guidance would be layered on. In some cases, there won't be any private sector guidance, and as a result, the IPSASB proposes that it would develop guidance greenfield. But where there is appropriate private sector guidance, the IPSASB would start there. A good example of this, and this is by no means a final decision, but the IPSASB reviewed the exposure drafts released by the ISSB on the general disclosures and climate-related disclosures, and in both cases, the IPSASB felt those were good starting points for the public sector. And as a result, would propose that those be the starting points, and the IPSASB really focus its efforts and resources on private sector issues and make sure those are incorporated into the guidance that the ISSB has developed, and make sure that it's appropriate for the public sector. As I mentioned, this continuum isn't really designed to be applied for the entire sustainability gamut of projects. It would be assessed on a project by project basis to determine whether there is private sector guidance that is relevant. This slide looks at the type of guidance that the IPSASB proposes to develop, and then what would be reported if that guidance was applied. So I'll start on the right-hand side of this diagram, and this is the side of the diagram that shows if the IPSASB developed the guidance, what would be reported by entities applying this guidance. And should you apply this guidance, the IPSASB expects that the reporting entity would be able to report on its governance, its strategy, its risk management, and the targets and outcomes of its sustainability initiatives. And I won't go into it much more than that, except to say that the right-hand side of this diagram and the outputs or the reporting that's available from the IPSASB's expected proposals is aligned with the TCFD, the Task Force for Climate-Related Disclosures, the proposals they put out a while ago. On the left-hand side of this diagram, I'll spend a little more time here, and this is the type of guidance that the IPSASB expects to develop. And if I start at the top of the diagram, the white box, the General Sustainability Disclosure Guidance, the IPSASB is of the view that where it's going to have to start is developing a framework for sustainability reporting. And that's kind of the general disclosure requirements that could be applied in any case, but it's not specific yet. It's just your general sustainability disclosure requirements that your topic specific guidance, the blue and green boxes, would kind of operate within, or the general requirements that specific requirements would be based on. As it develops the general sustainability disclosure guidance, the IPSASB believes that it'll also be important to develop topic-specific guidance, and that's your light blue and green box. The light blue box will focus on sustainability initiatives and their impact on the entity itself. So this goes back to one of the earlier examples I gave, where you might have an energy regulator and it might make a decision to operate its operations by only using clean energy or green energy, and this box would help those entities report on those types of decisions. Whereas on the right-hand side of the diagram, the green box, this would focus on the impact of those decisions on broader society. So if that same energy regulator decided that the private sector could only develop energy from clean sources or green sources, what is the impact on society? So again, this is probably more of a public sector area, and as a result, the IPSASB, if you went back to the previous slide, that the two arrows, the green box is likely where the IPSASB would do more greenfield thinking, because I don't think there's going to be the same type of guidance in the private sector that the IPSASB can lean on going forward. And then finally, at the bottom of this box, the function specific metrics. This will just help entities, I guess, measure against the sustainability targets they've set or the sustainability initiatives that they've begun, and allows them to evaluate how they're doing, so that users of their financial information or their sustainability information are able to evaluate how they're doing. So that moves us into our next preliminary view 3. And the question here is, if the IPSASB were to develop sustainability reporting guidance, it would apply the framework on the previous slide. The IPSASB would work in collaboration with other international bodies through the application of its current processes. Do you agree? And the last point I'll make on working with other international bodies while people are responding is the IPSASB already applies the process of relying on private sector standards where appropriate in its financial reporting program. So IPSASB does have experience doing that. And really what it does is it allows the IPSASB not to have to rethink concepts that are already working in the private sector that are applicable for the public sector, and really lean in or focus its resources on public sector issues. So again, here, this isn't overly surprising, but it's nice to see that there's support for the IPSASB's planned way forward should the IPSASB go ahead with sustainability reporting. The next preliminary view that was tied into the two slides that I just went through is, if the IPSASB were to develop sustainability reporting guidance, it proposes to address the general requirements for sustainability related information and climate related disclosures as its first topics. Do you agree? I didn't necessarily talk too much to this on the two slides, so as people are answering, or if you want to wait to answer, I'll give you a little more background on this. As I mentioned, the IPSASB reviewed the 2 exposure drafts that were issued by the ISSB. They relate to your general requirements for sustainability related information and climate related disclosures. And the IPSASB preliminarily decided those were good starting points for the public sector. So as a result, as one of the proposals is to move with haste, the IPSASB thought these were good places to start in order to start to develop sustainability reporting guidance for the public sector. And as a result, it's where the IPSASB expects to start should it move ahead with sustainability reporting. So full support there, which is nice. So I'll move on to our next slide. And Augustine, I think you're taking over here.
Thanks, Dave. So this slide is looking to discuss the key enablers that the IPSASB will need to move forward with sustainability reporting guidance in the public sector. As we can see on the graph, we show kind of there's an interdependence between quality, time, and cost. Particularly as sustainability reporting is a public sector issue that is a present topic that requires swift action from the IPSASB if it decides to take it forward. Therefore, it's imperative that we strike the right balance when we think quality, time, and cost as to deliver high quality sustainability guidance. And this kind of translate on those 5 points on the left. So what are those key enablers that would allow us to strike that right balance? So one of them that Dave has touched upon is appropriate resourcing. And this is the fact that the existing staff and funding that the IPSASB has is already committed to the financial reporting work program. And therefore it brings the IPSASB to the point that additional staff will be required. And also there's a need of diversification of the funding sources as to allocate money to take forward the sustainability reporting. The second one that comes into play is obtaining experience in an active sustainability reference group to advise the IPSASB. So why does this come into place? Well, it comes into place because the IPSASB has existing experience and knowledge in the public sector and financial reporting, but will need to boost, will need to boost and strengthen its experience in sustainability. And this can be done by setting up a sustainability reference group, which will be composed of scientific experts, potential users, investors in government bonds, and therefore it's key to bring that knowledge. So this group will advise the IPSASB as it's developing the sustainability guidance. The third one that we see here is how do we effectively and efficiently use the IPSASB member time? So what do we mean by this? Well, one of the proposals on the CP is that to develop the sustainability guidance, we will be leveraging on the existing IPSASB board. Their time is a volunteer time, and therefore we have to be efficient and effective when we use that time. And that will come into play when we deploy staff and how we utilize that sustainability reference group that I mentioned before that will help in the development on those sustainability reporting guidance. The fourth one, and which has been discussed through this presentation, is the coordination with international organizations, such as the Global Reporting Initiative, GRI, and the International Sustainability Standard Board, ISSB. So as we discussed, the first two topics, general disclosures and climate related, will rely on the ISSB if we decide to take it forward and the decision is pending in the future. But there's expectation that based on what has been reviewed, it would place that reliance. And so then in this sense, it's important for us to coordinate and work with these international organizations. As they've mentioned before, the IPSASB already has experience on this. When we look at the public sector standards, as opposed to developing new concepts, we rely on well-established concepts that make sense and are applicable to the public sector. And therefore that will still be playing when we develop the sustainable, when the IPSASB develops sustainability related disclosures and overall the bigger umbrella. The fifth one is communication with national standard setters. So this means like we are aware that national standard setters are currently developing guidance and are working on sustainability guidance. And therefore it will be key for the IPSASB to get insight on the local issues, as that will help develop and inform the IPSASB overall global view. Therefore, the dialogue between the IPSASB and the national standard setters is key to obtain this right balance between these three areas, quality, cost, and time, that we consider are important. So this will make us move to the preliminary review number 5, which is these key enablers are needed for the IPSASB to take forward the development of reporting, of sustainability reporting guidance. Do you agree? I think maybe we could close the poll and see what the results are. Okay, that's great. So we have support for this, and then we appreciate knowing that we're on the right track when it comes to this. So if we now, I will introduce the specific matter subject for comments number 2, and then I will pass it on to Dave. And the question is, to what extent will you be willing to support IPSASB in the development of sustainability reporting guidance?
So, yeah, so I was just going to say, as you're answering this, we don't have a polling question set up for this because it's more open-ended. So if people have thoughts, please include those in the chat, and we'll consider them. I guess what we're looking for here is there anything the IPSASB should be aware of? Are there any initiatives that are going on within your organization that the IPSASB should be aware of, that we should reach out to and learn more about sustainability reporting to understand, I guess, better what's going on in your jurisdiction? So anything from that perspective, is there anywhere that you feel like you can support in any way, or just anything that we should know of? So that's kind of what we're looking for. And if there is anything, please let us know, and we'll bring that back to the IPSASB. So as you're typing, I will move into kind of wrapping this up, and thank you, first of all, for all your answers to the polling questions, and for those of you writing in the chat right now. Again, just going back to our May 2022 launch of the Sustainability Reporting Consultation Paper, this was launched with 2 other documents, and that's really because they're all linked. So we spent this entire webinar talking about the Sustainability Reporting Consultation Paper. I touched at the very beginning on the mid-period work program consultation. This went out last year, and like I said, there wasn't, the IPSASB explicitly said that we were going to consider sustainability reporting as the next strategy, but constituents said, don't miss this opportunity. Now is the time for the IPSASB to step into this space. So as a result, there's a link to that document as well. This isn't a consultation. This is what the IPSASB has added to its work program, and is a consultation feedback and indicates what constituents told us. There's a link there, so we issued them together. And then finally, I touched on this as well, the natural resources consultation paper. And while there's not the IPSASB was very clear that natural resources is scoping out any sustainability reporting associated with natural resources. As I mentioned, in a number of cases, sustainability reporting or sustainability initiatives could be addressed with natural resources. So there is a link there. So as a result, the IPSASB thought it was important that these documents were issued together as well. All 3 documents were issued on May 9th. Sustainability reporting has a comment closing period of September 9th. Natural resources is open until mid-October. And like I said, the mid-period feedback statement isn't open for consultation. It's just what's been added to the IPSASB's work program. Finally, next steps. So as I just mentioned on the last slide, the sustainability reporting consultation period paper has a consultation period of 4 months. It closes on September 9th. Initially, the IPSASB considered having a longer consultation period, but ultimately decided that since one of the themes of the consultation paper is we need to move with haste, it was important we move with haste on this first step. The reason why we picked September 9th is this is the week before the IPSASB's International Standard Setters Forum in Cascais, Portugal. And that will be an opportunity for the IPSASB to meet with standard setters around the world and get their input and share feedback from the sustainability reporting consultation paper. It'll really be the first time the IPSASB discusses responses publicly, and like I said, gets views from standard setters from around the world. In Q4, this is the second bullet, the IPSASB will analyze the response to the CP. And when I say response to the CP, that also includes any answers to the polling questions or anything we hear through these webinars. And then in December, at the IPSASB's December meeting, the IPSASB will make a decision on whether to move ahead with sustainability reporting and adding it to its work program. Like I said at the very beginning, this decision we made in two respects. The first will be, is there support from constituents? And then the second will be, can the IPSASB develop resources or enhance or add its resources to really take forward a sustainability reporting guidance development. The last three bullets we put to be determined beside them, and that's because they're all really contingent on whether the IPSASB decides to move ahead with sustainability reporting in December. Should the IPSASB decide to move ahead, it'll first focus on climate-related disclosures and general disclosure requirements. And the plan right now is to rely on or align with the ISSB guidance that's been issued as EDs right now, making changes for the public sector where appropriate. Next year, assuming everything goes ahead as planned, the IPSASB plans to consult on both those documents and hear back from its stakeholders. And then finally, the last bullet would be to publish those reporting requirements as soon as possible. For those of you familiar with the IPSASB's normal timelines and standard setters normal timelines in general, a year to 18 months to get to final standard is very quick, and that's really the IPSASB's commitment to move ahead with this in haste, should it be able to, from a resourcing perspective and a support from constituents perspective. So I will wrap up here. I would just like to thank everyone today that took the time out of their days, and I know everyone has a very busy schedule, so thank you very much for giving us an hour or so to go through the IPSASB proposals. And thank you very much for answering the polling questions and sharing your comments in the chat function. Like I said at the very beginning, it'll be very helpful for the IPSASB moving forward in making decisions. So thank you very much for your time, and I hope this was helpful for you if you're planning to craft a response for September 9th. So thank you very much from Augustine and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day. Thank you.